Welcome to D&D Out Loud with Ben Riggs. Episode 73. All RPGs are inherently unfinished. A conversation with Justin Alexander and Leyline Press.
Welcome one and all to D&D Out Loud with Ben Riggs. I am Ben Riggs, apparently controversial D&D historian and author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. And over the past 13 years of writing and podcasting, I have met hundreds of creative geniuses in and around the world of tabletop role-playing games. Here on this show, I ask two, and in this case, three of these flaming torches of human imagination to come on and have a fascinating discussion, which I then record and send out into the world. Today, we are going to be talking to three people who I think are doing amazing work, and I can't wait to see what they're going to have to say to each other. First up, we're joined by two of the most exciting independent publishers in tabletop role-playing today, Aled Lawlor and Panayiotis Lines, the creative duo behind Leyline Press. In just a few short years, Leyline has carved out a reputation for distinctive, atmospheric role-playing games that blend striking visual design with elegant, playable mechanics. I purchased Salvage Union at Gen Con, and its art has absolutely transported me. The game itself mashes up mecha combat, exploration, and socialism absolutely delightfully. Aled and Panny are reshaping what small press tabletop games can look and feel like. Welcome, gentles.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
And then we are, of course, also thrilled to welcome a name familiar to just about every game master who's ever looked deeper into the craft. A man whose influence on the culture of tabletop role-playing games is difficult to overstate. The human responsible for the blog, the Alexandrian, Justin Alexander, whose essays, reviews, and innovative techniques like the 3-clue rule have become touchstones in modern role-playing game discourse. His book, So You Want to Be a Game Master, is absolutely outstanding and has been read, I think, by 4 different tweens in my 7th and 8th grade classroom. So welcome, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me. And the best part of that was hearing that there are tweens reading my books. So that's fantastic to be able to reach out like that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a classroom copy, and again, I don't know if any of you work with young people, but the ubiquity of D&D and role-playing is... I've been teaching for the past 15 years, and I've been teaching 12 to 14-year-olds for the past 15 years. And over that time, it's gone from 3 to 4 kids play to everyone either plays, wants to, or is interested. And my copy of So You Want to Be a Game Master, it just keeps making the rounds. I think I'm gonna have to buy a new copy next year because it's getting so worn out and threadbare. So you're doing the good work there, sir. All right, so I this episode came about because I met Panny at Gen Con and bought Salvage Union, which I am loving. And Panny suggested a discussion that included Aled and you, Justin. So let me start with Panny. How has Justin's work influenced you?
Yeah, so I think, well, way back in the halcyon days of 2008, 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons came out, coincidentally on my birthday. So I picked up a copy, and it was the first role-playing game I properly engaged with, because 3rd edition, me and my friends tried to get into it, but there was a lot of like 3rd edition content at that point, and it was quite overwhelming. But 4th was a nice clean slate. And I really enjoyed it at first, but I found it uses a kind of sort of linear encounter-based kind of design to it, and I found it just wasn't matching up to my expectations of what I really wanted out of Dungeons and Dragons and role playing, which was much more like exploratory sandbox freeform experience, and to sort of replicate all the sort of crazy stories I'd heard like reading online about D&D. And then I stumbled onto Justin's blog, where you laid out things like the 3-clue rule, which suddenly just sort of lit a light bulb in my head of like, oh, you can have different structures in design, and that it's all kind of yeah, it's all about structures. Was kind of what I took from it in a broad sense, and then that really helped me sort of get into being able to like design and structure sessions, but were a lot more like freeform, and then eventually start designing games myself. So yeah, it was really helped me early on in my DMing, and it was just a really good blog that I just kept going back to over and over again with multiple good stuff on it as well. Like the calibrating expectations was a really good article as well, a really interesting take on expectations of D&D, and lots of other good articles as well that really helped me. And that's kind of why I thought, oh yeah, it'd be really cool to talk to you.
Well, I'm really honored that you would ask me on to have this conversation with you. Salvage Union is a game that I've been exploring myself. Haven't had a chance to get it to the table yet, but I stumbled across it because I was looking at various mecha-based RPGs, and then discovered that there is this rich, like Ben was saying, this rich exploration element to it that's really fascinating. I've been trying to get my hands around it and get a feel for it. So I'm very excited to be here to chat with you guys.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. It uses we use like point crawl sort of structure to it, but with it's kind of OSR influenced in, but it's sort of scrap for XP in a very loose sense. So taking that sort of gold for XP structure and adding our twist to it. And I think it works really well. Certainly people seem to be playing it still and enjoying it.
Well, one of the things I really enjoy, which is really attracting me to Salvage Union, is this idea of, like you say, like gold for XP, which is the old school classic method of providing sort of a default goal that people can tap into and have as a way of motivating a campaign, motivating adventures, and getting out there into the world in a very sort of flexible, open-ended kind of way. But I've really been fascinated the past couple of years with approaches that aren't just like, oh, well, number goes up or whatever the case may be, but looks at what the next step of that is, which is how do we, once you've got that gold, or in the case of Salvage Union, scrap, what do you actually do with that to invest and build in the world? And so one of the things that's really fascinating about Salvage Union is the fact that scrap then comes back and you're building your mechs and you're building your crawlers, and particularly the mechs are great, like investing in your character and the way those go, but being able to invest in your crawler, in your community, and how the world develops around that is really fantastic. A couple of years back, I ran a open table featuring Castle Blackmore, the sort of original dungeon by Dave Arneson. And one of the things I explored in that campaign was special interest XP, which was you didn't just get XP for gold, you had to spend that gold on things that weren't your equipment. And that was really an eye-opening experience for me, because all this play that would eventually develop in my campaigns, like 7 or 8 or 10 levels into them, was suddenly happening at first level, where people were like opening up meaderies and building temples and taking over the local church because they had a motivation to become invested in the world. And then they did. And it's really such a fascinating way of extending that sort of core game loop.
I remember I read, and I think you streamed. I think you streamed a couple of games of that. And
I did,
and I remember reading about that, and it was again, it's again applying a sort of structure to kind of enable like free form play. And I think gold for XP, though initially seems a very weird concept, I think is really good for doing that, because it sort of gives player driven goals, and then adding that layer of players can then, as you say, like make, they can make a statue to their god, or they can open up an orphanage or whatever. Like, it really gets them invested in their sort of the local area in a way that really promotes agency, I think, which is really important for me when playing and running games. And Salvage Union tries to do that in a similar way with Scrap, and it's very focused on your supporting your community. It's growing as you grow into the game as well, and you're feeding people, you're building med bays, things like that. It's a really important aspect. And there is that strange route of OD&D is sort of follows up to Salvage Union in a weird way, especially within that. And I think more games. I think more games that can do that, the better.
I think one of the things that I really liked about when it was kind of when we were playtesting it, it came about as sort of an unintended consequence, actually, of the way that the sort of the leveling system in Salvage worked, was that it just makes it really, really great for sort of West Marches style play as well, because the group levels together, because it's the crawler that levels up. Like, you know, the player characters don't level beyond obviously training new abilities or, you know, upgrading equipment, which can all be then sort of rejigged, you know, per each downtime. But then, so you get this, obviously, this core group, but then people can flit in and out of that group, but then the progression mechanic sort of stays pretty level in that regard, which is now sort of my favorite way of running Salvage. Actually, is just sort of like open table play is actually just really, cause it's so easy. And it's sort of, it gets around some of those things. My main issue often with games is just scheduling, right? Like, you know, trying to get everyone there at the same time, and it just makes it that much easier because you can just have a group of 10, 15 people, and, you know, you've always got a few people then that can turn up each week, right?
Well, as you know, I'm a huge aficionado for open table play because, like you say, it solves the whole scheduling issue. And there's so many cool things that happen when you have people, real people, engaging with your campaign world in different ways and at different times, and then seeing the impact of each other. I'm really curious about this because something I'm often thinking about when I'm looking at a role-playing game these days is how can I run this at an open table? Like right now, I'm currently trying to figure out how to tweak the core structures of Mothership to get an open table up and running. So I'm kind of curious with Salvage Union, like what does the open table look like? Is everyone on the same crawler working together, or are there multiple crawlers that you're running?
Generally, sorry. I'm currently running one.
Can I interrupt 1 second? I'm sorry to interrupt 1 second, but as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about the audience, and I'm like, so, Aled, could you explain the crawler mech pilot dynamic for the audience really quick?
Sure, yeah. So when you start the character creation in the game, it sort of leads you through it, but you start with pilot. So pilots are per player. So you create pilots very quick. You just pick one ability, two pieces of equipment, and a class. And then you then choose your mech. So then you build your mech out of chassis, systems, modules, and you have a sort of starting scrap total with which to build that. And then finally, you all together build the crawler, which is a sort of moving stronghold, sort of giant mech, sort of bit Mortal Engines-y, or sort of Jawa Sand crawler or something to that effect. Like, you know, if you can picture that, it should be on page 100, I think, yeah, or 99, yeah. So that sort of thing. And as you gather scrap each downtime, you have to bring back 5 scrap to upkeep your crawler, or the bays inside it start to deteriorate, and then that'll stop you from being able to do certain downtime procedures like healing your characters, or repairing your mechs, or creating new stuff, crafting new things. As you start then paying that upkeep over multiple downtimes, then you hit the upgrade cap, and then it'll upgrade to the next tech level, unlocking a whole slew of new pieces of equipment, systems, modules, chassis. And then, yeah, so when you do that on an open table basis, everyone is kind of a member of the same crawler. And they're sort of one big salvaging crew. Not everybody goes out on every foray, but, you know, everyone's sort of together on the same crawler. And so each session, that crawler keeps leveling up. And then when you come back into the game, you know, you have whatever spare scrap, systems, modules are on the crawler stored in the storage bay. And then you can say, well, before we go out, I'm going to, you know, take some of that shared stuff, because everything on the crawler is shared. So I'm going to take some of that, upgrade my mech, and then you can keep playing with that same character in a group. There's some disparity in level, but everyone has access to the same stuff, right? So it means that there's kind of like this smooth curve of leveling across the whole group. And, you know, you don't sort of, oh, cool, I missed like 6 sessions now. Everyone's like, you know, level 7, level 8, and, you know, I'm still stuck at level 1. I can't do anything. Yeah, it sort of works really, really well for that sort of thing. And it's not something we initially kind of intended, I think, to design, right, Penny?
No, yeah, that's what I was just thinking. It was almost a shame when I started to run the open table games of it. There was part of me that was like, oh, this game, like Salvage Union of itself, might be better if we did like explicitly design it to be played in open table. But then from a commercial standpoint, that's tricky, because most people want to play with a group. At least that's as far as I feel is probably the majority preferred way of playing. And I can't actually think of any game that's been released that's like explicitly like, no, this game is designed for you to play it with an open table. So you do have to make a few tweaks to rules to make it flow, I feel. The biggest change I make when I'm running open tables is everyone's mechs basically get liquidated at the end of the session. So if you imagine, I don't know, there's 4 players, say, they each have, let's say their mech's worth 10 scrap loosely. So they all get back to the crawler. They also have some additional scrap, so they've got from the mission. So let's say they've got 10 extra scrap between them. So then all their mechs get liquidated into a pool of 40 scrap. They get the additional 10 scrap on top. And then when the next group comes along, they get then 50 scrap between them to build their mechs. I find that works a lot better than the method in the book, which is you more have individual mechs and then you can take parts, because everyone's too polite in open tables, and there's lots of spreadsheets and it gets quite complicated.
People get way too attached to their mechs as well. The whole game is designed like, the leveling system is upgrade your mech, change it out for a newer, better one on a regular basis, right? Like that's the whole point. One thing that sort of we didn't quite factor for maybe was people get like, they design one mech and they go, no, there are many like it, but this one is mine. And, it's like, never want to change it. I want the number to go up. And it's like, but it never goes up. You can't.
It doesn't. Yeah. Some people have already house ruled it so that they can effectively level up their mech.
I think house rules are the greatest love letter to a game, honestly. So no higher compliment than, the thing about a house rule is it means you're actually using the game, right? Which is always fantastic. The other thing I find is your comment about like games not being designed for open table. Like the closest one I can think of would be like the original 1974 edition of D&D, because that's how Dave and Gary were actually playing the game. So that's what it was designed for. And then a little bit of like early Traveler and some of those early 1970s RPGs, but then the RPGs very quickly move into dedicated tables, which is the way admittedly most people are playing these days, is one GM and a set group of players. The only game I can think of out there that even comes close to supporting open table play out of the box is the troop style play of like Ars Magica, for example, where everybody's playing from a pool of characters. But it is interesting you mentioned like the fact that like you don't see it because you think most people want to play with the dedicated table. But something I've been really interested in thinking about in terms of open tables is how open tables are so mimetically viral, in the sense that like, because it is so easy to invite someone, hey, come play for a session, you don't have to commit for a whole year. You as individuals, you are both getting to play with more people more often, but also what effect does that have on the game if you have people running open tables for it out there? And I think back to like when I was doing So You Want to Be a Game Master, and now I'm working on the sequel, So You Want to Be a Dragon Slayer. I was looking at the player experience. Something I looked at and did a lot of research into is what did a bunch of early D&D, like what is D&D books? Some of them were literally called What is D&D, that were published in the late 70s and early 80s, and also magazine articles and APA articles from that time period that were talking about what is this new game? What is this role-playing thing that we're doing? And a lot of people talked about how they got into it, and it was a lot of people talking about, well, I was on a military base, or I was in my college dorm and I was walking down the hallway and there were some people playing this weird new game, and somebody said, hey, jump on in. And then 5 minutes later I had a character and was in a dungeon and I was hooked. And that just doesn't happen at a dedicated table because, you jump on in for the next year and a half, right? So I think about what effect that has on like, not just you personally being able to interact with people, but what effect does it have on your game if you have game masters out there who are introducing it instead of just to 5 people, or introducing it to 10, 15, 20. I had an open table a decade ago that actually got up to as many as 60 players because I was involved in the local theater community. So pretty much everyone I was in the show with would come over and end up playing the game. And some of those people I'm still gaming with, which is the cool thing about open tables is it so radically expands the sort of pool of people you get to play games with in the long term as well.
Sorry. I was just going to ask, do you find that you get more buy-in from players as well? Once they've had like some level of experience, right? Because it's something I've sort of noticed, albeit on a more limited scale, not 60. Sort of once people have played like a little bit, they're more likely then as well to like keep coming back, right? Do you find a similar thing, like that you get more people sort of being more regular as well, or?
I do, yeah. I mean, you have people who are casual, and there are people who just, would love to be doing more, but their lives are too busy. And those are people that sometimes are some of the greatest players, but you just don't get to play with them if the only way you can play is for them to be available every week. So you get those too. But yeah, the thing is, you get a very different kind of buy-in in the sense that there's something special. Like if you're playing a dedicated campaign with the same five people and your characters go to the edge of town and they build a temple, that's cool because you've built this temple and like the game master can do things about that or whatever the case may be. But if you have that happen in an open table where there's in a shared world where there's either other groups or other players who are out there um, experiencing the same stuff, then the knowledge that those people who you may never even necessarily meet in some cases will see your temple makes it realer in a way. And then vice versa, when you see like, oh, last time I was here, there wasn't a shrine to the goddess of healing on the edge of town, but now there is, and somebody in the real world built that. That also feels more real. So there's this real sense of there is this greater sense of investment in the campaign as a whole and a very unique flavor to that compared to what you get in a dedicated campaign. And obviously, there's different kinds of investment that happen in a dedicated campaign. But yeah, so I definitely do see over time you get people who can get very invested in how is this world evolving, and then you also get something about the fact that there are also like in an open table, the story isn't necessarily a group story, although I'm curious about that in Salvage Union because you have that unifying principle of the crawler, so we're building
Yep.
that together. But it's not necessarily like a group story. So you end up with the focus being on all these individual narratives and how those individual narratives weave around each other. And that's also kind of a really cool and unique flavor that really is like that makes the world feel like a real place because there's all these different people moving through it on individual trajectories.
Yeah. Um, Absolutely. I mean, I think like I'd say open tables are now sort of our preferred way to playtest games internally as well. Like we recently wrapped up Achaean, which is one of the projects we're working on, which is an ancient Greek Merkborg. And we ran an open table for that, and it worked really well. I did it like a hex crawl, which kind of suits it. But one thing interesting I found was so there was a player Billy who was really invested, but life was busy, so only got to come to one session out of the, we were playing for about 6 months or so. But had a great time in that session, and then even like at the end when we were all hanging out and the other players were like sort of waxing lyrical about like how the campaign went, how it all ended up, like he was just as invested and just as excited to hear all about it as the players who'd been there, pretty much every session, which I found really interesting. Like just even turning up for one session can make someone like really still quite invested in the world and invested in the game and what's happening in it, because I think it's that getting that experience of play I think is really important. Role-playing games, I think they need to be played. I find like they're hard to explain. You can watch them obviously, and streaming's been great, but they're definitely like experiential in a way that's hard to pin down. So then being able to get even put someone in for one session really does, I find, invest them in a way that's very difficult to do otherwise. So yeah, I love open tables now. I think it's definitely my preferred way.
You can describe role-playing games until you fall over from exhaustion, and people still won't necessarily get it in the way that they will within the first few minutes of playing the game. I For my bachelor party, actually, my brother, who was my best man, said, "What do you want to do for this bachelor party?" I was like, "I don't know, man." He was like, "Well, what if we just play D&D?" And I was like, "You mean you'd run D&D for me?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, that sounds great because I'm a forever GM at that point." And I was like, "Great." And plus, at that point I was so exhausted from trying to get the wedding to come together. So my brothers invited all the wedding party over to play a game of D&D. And one of the people who came over for was a friend who had never played a role-playing game before, had been kind of aware of it, but just hadn't done it. So I remember us all sitting down and kind of getting going. He was actually running 1974 D&D because it was actually at the time I was running that open table I was just talking about. So we were running that. I remember getting about 5 minutes into the session, and the guy who'd never played before stopped and went, "Wait, wait, 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 wait. This is what we're doing? This is what we're doing?" And then he was completely bought in and rolled with it from that point forward. But that's such a crystal memory for me of someone just being like, "Oh, 5 minutes of this, and suddenly I've just completely understood what this whole thing is about."
Yeah, the I've done that quite a few times with people who've never played any RPGs or anything, that no idea what it is, always camping, because like, you know, you're camping in the woods or whatever around a campfire at night, there's nothing to do, right? So then I pretty much always end up running something, and I never have books or dice or anything, so it's always like, okay, cool, let's get some sticks and we'll carve some wooden d6s, and then like, you know, and it's always just some like FKR thing, like, you know, whatever, just come up with something and then run. And then as soon as people do that, then they're kind of like, oh, well, that was a lot of fun, we should do that again. And then it's like, okay, but you know, there's a whole load of stuff out there, so like, you know, and then it's kind of right, okay, cool, well, let's play an actual game. And you know, sort of but yeah, it's like you say, you can describe it till you're blue in the face, but it's until you're actually doing it, it's not a thing.
Can I give a relevant anecdote from a former Wizards of the Coast employee?
Please.
So this former Wizards of the Coast employee I was interviewing, and it was after the failure of Sigil. And I guess I shouldn't say failure, because it's still up there, but they're not further developing it, right? If you're listening and you don't know, Sigil was is the virtual tabletop for the current version of D&D. And I think in March, they fired everyone except like 2 guys from the team, and basically they're not going forward with it anymore. And they've tried numerous times to adapt D&D to a virtual tabletop. And the former employee says they're never going to succeed because they're never going to put enough money into developing it, because D&D is way too complex. The number of spells, the number of effects, like when you're doing it alone at a table, it's fine. But when you have to actually have a machine doing it all, doing the work of the imagination, it becomes prohibitively expensive, and no one seems to have the stomach to pay what you'd actually have to pay to have a virtual tabletop simulate Dungeons and Dragons. And that's before you even loop in the social dynamics of the table. Because again, when we sit down, we're with our friends or with strangers, engaging socially with other humans, but at the same time playing this game, which, even if it is a simple game, does demand a lot of the human brain and a lot of work of the human brain that we don't even think about when we're doing it, like when we're imagining a magic missile slamming into someone's butt. So when you guys talk about sitting down at a table and seeing in 5 minutes what a role-playing game is, even though... And there, Justin, I also went back and read some of those 1970s articles where people are just trying so hard to explain what Dungeons and Dragons is.
Well, and the only section that ever actually works is the examples of play. That I remember when I was getting going, like when I was a 10 to 12-year-old getting into role playing games. I remember like in every book and I would zone in on those examples of play and just devour them, because I was just trying to like somehow crawl through the page and get into the table and understand what the heck was going on at those tables. I was so hungry to understand the table dynamics.
Have you ever written Justin, have you ever written a what is a role-playing game section? It's always, I always find it fascinating in books, like, you know, there's the what is the role-playing game section. Like, how would you describe it?
The example I used to use like 20 years ago when I was writing these sections is something actually, I think I picked it up from Greg Stolze, but it is that a role-playing game is like an improvised radio drama. And these days I sometimes say it's like an improvised audiobook drama. Because there's something about the fact that like radio dramas and then what you like those audiobook multicast audiobook dramas you have, it's a similar dynamic. And completely vocally based, which I think is also the other thing that helps people kind of like, oh, that's what we're actually. It's not that we're all necessarily physically here doing something on a table. It's that we are sharing a story through our voices. So I've used that one I used to use that one quite a bit, but I find that generationally, Alpha and Z, you go, you know, like a radio drama, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, get off my lawn, old man.
Orson Welles.
It's improv podcast, right?
Yeah, improv podcast would be great. Yeah, so like, yeah, so so that one's kind of going away a little bit, but yeah, it's definitely something I've dealt with several times. I did the Infinity role playing game for Modiphius has one. My Legends and Labyrinths game had one. So
I
I've
remember
done that.
I actually I ran the Infinity game for the Modiphius on a stream, I think, for Modiphius when I was working there. So I got tasked with that one. I think I got so much of it wrong, though.
It ended up being a beast of a game.
It's a complicated game, yeah. My favorite rule in it, I think, was the Geist rules I really liked, actually. It was like that was one little nugget I picked out, and I was like, I do that all the time now. Whenever there's like sort of, a helper character or something like that, it's like, okay, well, nominate someone else at the table to play that character. So you're not having conversations with yourself. I thought that was really smart, actually. I like that.
Yeah, that's the concept I actually first developed running Eclipse Phase campaigns, because in Eclipse Phase you have little AI helpers, and they would never be part of the table because, just put on your character sheet. But like in the world, you're supposed to be constantly talking to them. So I did a thing where it was always if you're playing the character, then the person to your left is playing your AI helper, and then I brought that into Infinity for the AI helper Geist characters that we had in that. That was actually something that developed at an open table as well. Because I was like Eclipse Phase, and like if it was a dedicated table, you could just, obviously assign your secondary roles to the other AIs or whatever. But I was like, well, at an open table, how do we do this? And it ended up being, okay, well, whatever open table you're playing, you hand this briefing sheet for your AI to the person on your left, which created really interesting dynamics, because it was about trying to figure out, well, what information do you need to communicate in a single briefing sheet to this person who may have never met this AI before to play that AI effectively for you, and then kind of seeing how those relationships developed through multiple interpretations was interesting. So yeah, that was a fun little, and like you say, I use that all the time for familiars and all kinds of stuff. It's just such an effective way to get those role-playing dynamics back into those relationships.
Oh, sure.
We interrupted Ben, though. He was going to tell us a thing about the
I think about what? I'm sorry, I just had a loud cough.
You were in the middle of telling a story, and then we went off on a tangent.
No, I think that was fine. I mean, I think I got out exactly what I needed to. But unless someone can trick my memory back to where it was, or I can ask another question or rant about something else.
So you were talking about about Sigil and how you're never going to master that. At a digital table. The other thing too is like it becomes a Sisyphean task, because one of the cool things about a role-playing game is that I, as the GM, or even players, can say things that you never anticipated before, and be like, oh yeah, and suddenly like, oh, you want to light the pile of magical rocks on fire. Okay, well, what would happen with that? And you can never simulate that in this virtual world. So there's this, like a Sisyphean task where people keep trying to like make the virtual table more and more real, and handle more and more of the imagination, like you were saying. But ultimately, at a certain point, you're just doing a really crappy video game as opposed to a really cool role-playing game.
A thing I hear a lot from beginning players is, you mean you can do anything?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why when I'm playing with tweens, I'm like, you're all good aligned. All of you. You're all good aligned. No one is neutral. We're not messing around with anything else. You're all good aligned. And I do sometimes think about the design of that back in the 70s, and how I wonder if, I don't think Gary was, I'm pretty sure that was Gary. And I don't think Gary was doing that as a way to exert control over the characters and the players. And yet, as a DM, it is a thing that when you impose it on a player, it does allow you a lot of control. Because otherwise, let me tell you, these tweens, it would all be murder and theft. Like, who can I murder and take the stuff from? I don't care if it's another player. That kid irritated me at lunch. I'm going to stab him in the back. And if I could not tell them, you're all good aligned, it would go sideways. It is amazing, though, that they do respect it. Like, none of them question the fiat of me saying it and then enforcing it at the table. No one's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. No one has ever done that, which is an interesting thing to think about. But here,
I think, sorry, from a design perspective, I think the way I've always, we've talked about it internally with Leyline, like all role-playing games are inherently incomplete, right? Is that this is the problem, like, because until that's given to a group, it's not finished, because the game itself, the game experience as a whole, is the product of everybody's sort of continuing involvement, right? Like, you know, and all those GM rulings and stuff that happen. And even then, when it comes to designing the game, I think it's kind of important sometimes to decide which bits you're not going to rule. It's so easy just to sort of like try and fill every edge case with a ruling in the book, right? And it's not always actually conducive to making a good game in that regard. If you try and put in all of those little edge case examples, which you would have to do obviously for a video game, or, you know, have you?
Right.
Yeah, I think, yeah, in terms of like the virtual tabletop and I don't know, yeah, whether AI can replicate it, there's a lot of like subtleties and nuance to actually running games. I wonder if, yeah, it could be replicated. Like, for example, one of my favorite techniques is just shutting up, which I think can be really important at the table. Like at the finale of our Achaean campaign, and the players effectively had to sort of decide the fate of the world, and that basically involved me going, okay, what do you want to do? And then just talking about it for like 2 hours or so until they came to a decision. And then afterwards they were like, that was amazing. That was the best finale ever. And I was like, I didn't say anything. I just let you sort of roll with your ideas. I didn't do anything really. But
there was a bit of PvP, wasn't there, involved in that?
There was. It did culminate into PvP. Yeah.
There were strong differences of opinion.
There were strong differences of opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's I think that can be a really important technique, because a lot of GMs will feel a pressure to like everything has to be epic and cool, and they have to like the finale has to be perfectly planned and go off without a hitch or whatnot. You know, the boss's monologue has to be great, etc. And I would just wonder, yeah, can a computer do that? Sorry.
Yeah, there's so. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but there's so much that of modern play culture, which is like, let's put everything on the GM, and the GM has to like be Atlas carrying the weight of the entire game upon their shoulders, and then you feel that pressure as a GM, and so you feel like I gotta do something, because otherwise, if I don't do something, the game isn't going to happen. It's like, now the game is what the players are doing, and a lot of the times, like you say, one of the best things you can do as a GM is just take a step back and give them space to cook and see what they come up with, and they'll prepare the finest meals you've ever eaten. But like you say, I mean, GMing is fascinating, because one of the things I talk about is So You Want to Be a Game Master is that in many ways being a GM can be very simple, and we sometimes overcomplicate it. But there is also, it is an art, and as a result there is an infinite sort of fractal level of complexity and skill and technique that goes into and shapes the individual moments of these games. I just released a video on YouTube talking about rolling initiative, and there's a technique I've been using for 20 years, which is that instead of rolling initiative at the beginning of a combat, I'll actually have my players roll at the end of the previous combat, so I have all the initiative scores ready to go. You know, pre-rolling is a good place to slot it in, because usually after a fight you're doing other bookkeeping anyways, all of that stuff. But it lets me launch encounters in games that have rolled initiative in a way that is much more to the point, to the action, where you can be like, oh, goblins jump out. What do you do about it? As opposed to goblins jump out, let's all spend a couple minutes rolling dice. And so that creates a very distinct experience from someone who loves saying roll initiative and wants to spend 2 minutes rolling dice. And that's just a matter of how do we as individual GMs kind of treat these moments, and how do we interpret even things that seem like simple, straightforward, simple rules in the rule book. The way in which those rules are applied and the way in which they are paced and brought to the table can vary so wildly and have so many different effects on how things are actually experienced. So it can be this very simple thing. It is this very simple thing to actually be a GM, particularly when you learn not that the weight of the world isn't entirely on your shoulders at the table. But then there's this infinite reward of exploring what it means to be a GM in just one system, let alone across multiple systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I find I'm sure you have a familiar thing where you end up just building this sort of toolbox of like techniques that you've used throughout sort of all your GMing, and then you just sort of can pluck them from the ether when a situation comes up. I often fall back on the question. It's in Salvage Union actually. A lot of the models effectively just let players ask questions about a situation, but it'll be like you can ask 3 questions, or you can ask 5 questions, or you get one true answer or one false answer. And I fall back on that a lot for when any sort of knowledge situation comes up, because I think that can be a tricky thing for GMs to handle, right? Like it's often like like you're rolling to find out something that you probably, is it useful? Are you going to know it anyway? So I find flipping it back, asking the players what they want to know, gives you information about like what are they interested in, how are they going to approach it, and lets you play within that, and also structure it and like limit it and boundary it. But having that toolkit's really important. It's just something you develop idiosyncratically, I think, like you say. So every table's going to have, every GM's going to have different ways of handling different things.
Can I ask? I am astounded at the creativity and fecundity and fertility of the tabletop role-playing game space still. It's remarkable to me that there is still so much creative energy and exploration going on. And I'd say let's can we take a minute and, in your mind, what is going on, or what's a game that excites you? What are you excited about in the tabletop role-playing game space right now? And feel free to take a second. You don't have to jump in with an answer right away. I would answer it's Outgunned from Two Little Mice, which basically takes Yahtzee and turns it into a role-playing game, and then uses that to simulate action films. And it's the first time I have seen a game, and I played 2 sessions of it. I ran 2 sessions of it so far, that accurately and quickly and easily simulates the feel of an action movie, and I absolutely love it.
I think it's been out for a while, but on a similar vein, actually, I really like Troika's initiative system for that. It's the I don't know if you're aware of it, but you get like a little bag with tokens in, and all the player characters get 2 tokens each. Each NPC or monster gets 1 token each, and there's an end token for the end of the round. So you just pull tokens out, and it's whoever's go for the token. So you might get 2 goes in a row, and then it's just the end of the round. That's it. Or like maybe all the monsters get to go and you just don't, because it's just chaotic. It's a chaotic jumble, right? Like, that's what combat's like, right? In the real world. So it's just, you don't know what's going to happen.
That sounds really fun.
it's actually really great, because it sort of emulates that thing. And I think this is something we talked about it a bit at Modiphius, actually, when we were there. And we're calling it like emulative mechanics. It's like, you're not trying to necessarily simulate the world. You're trying to get the feel of it across, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, that sort of old GURPS thing of, right, okay, well, what's the distance? Okay, bullet drop over, like, 500 yards, and what's the wind doing and all of that. It's just, how does it feel? Like, how does rolling that dice or interacting with that thing make you feel? And does it emulate that feeling appropriately? And, I would say sort of more of a development of that is starting to happen a bit more, which I really appreciate, actually.
I'd agree. Emulative design's really important. I think it's sort of a cornerstone of a lot of our design, and I think you're right. There's just a wealth of this, such an enormous wealth of good games coming out, especially like within the indie sphere, and like production values are getting like insanely good. We recently read through Triangle Agency, which just beautiful, just really well designed, just in terms of like layout and things like that. I recently played. It's a very old game now, but I haven't had a chance to play it because, but again, there's just so many good games out there. You don't. But Dread, I played recently, and it was actually really excellent, like for emulating horror. For those who don't know, Dread, you play with a Jenga tower, and you draw from the tower when you do an action, and when it collapses, someone always dies. And it was one of the most like fun sessions I've played in a very long time. And an excellent example of emulative design. Incredibly old game. I think it's like 20 years old, so it's a funny one to bring up, I guess. But it's one I played recently, and I think it now as well.
I mentioned a little bit, like the thing I'm currently like really digging deep into is Mothership. I'm trying to get an open table up and running on that we're in just the first few sessions of, and trying to figure out what the session structure looks like for that. So that's kind of thing I'm really digging into right now. But the other thing that has me really kind of excited that I've been kind of beginning to kind of dig into. It's just been such an explosion of solo RPG experiences over the last few years. That was in this, there'd be a few here and there, but kind of weird kind of experiences. But like I say, last 5 years or so, it feels like there's just been this explosion of solo RPG experiences and really exploring that space in a lot of different ways. So like I just did a play on my Twitch stream of a game called Goblin, which is coming out from Hexy Studios in the near future. They're doing a line of um, they're calling the Mischief line. There's like one about playing a goblin, one about being a kobold. So there's little like you're playing the NPCs of other campaigns kind of thing. But Goblin was entirely based around a hex crawl structure of exploring this hex crawl space within the RPG within the solo RPG experience. And then have things like Ironsworn or the Alone books for Call of Cthulhu, which are almost like a choose your own adventure exploration through the space, which is like the old adventure books. But you also have things like Trey, for example. So all these solo RPGs. So I've been kind of beginning to explore that space, and I'm really excited to see that because I think the fact that we're getting so many games there means that I got journaling solos like Thousand Year Vampire, for example. So just all these different ways of approaching solo RPGs, and I think the more that space gets explored from a design standpoint, the more exciting things we're kind of going to discover about it. Because like what you were saying, Ben, about the fact that you're excited about how there's such a fecundity of creativity still in the space, I really think we're just at the beginning, kind of the breakthrough point of this. I often use the comparisons of film, for example. If you look at the history of film, you have the very earliest examples of film, like in the late 1800s, and then there's a generation of creators who are basically filming stage plays, right? And then you get the generation of creators who were watching the film stage plays and saying, but there's so much more you can do with this art. And then about 50 years into it, you suddenly get Citizen Kane. And like, so there's this sort of generational approach where you get the pioneers, the people who are like, oh, we can use this to do the thing we were already doing. And then you get the people who were influenced by all of that coming up and truly taking the medium into its own. And that's kind of where RPGs are at, I think, is that we're at the beginning stages or the cusp of really seeing what happens in a fully mature RPG medium for the first time. And that's really exciting to me.
Wonder what's the going to be the RPG equivalent of the sort of TikTok interpersonal drama, sort of like 10 seconds at a time clip series, right? Like, where'd it go? Because there's so much you can do with it, right?
The sludge game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I've seen quite a few people trying to figure out what, like there's a Kickstarter coming up for a D&D Bridgerton kind of thing. And I don't know what that's going to be like, but the idea that there is this romance genre that hasn't really been tapped into that like is really popular, particularly among younger people right now, this romantasy genre in particular, that is not explored, and we haven't figured out how to really do that really well in a role-playing game for a number of reasons. But I think that's going to be, like you're saying, I think some place to go. I think also this, like, we talk about attention span, we talk about TikTok, we talk about these shorter forms. I've been convinced for several years. When I was at Atlas, we were actually working on, well, how do we actually put together what I'm now calling quick shots, which are like, how do you actually play a role-playing game in maybe 20 to 30 minutes instead of 4 hours? And what are the structures you need for that? What would that look like? Because I think that's actually also a really untapped space where open tables break the idea that you need to make a year-long commitment. I think there's also a place where you're like, hey, maybe you don't need 4 to 5 hours of your life in order to try out one of these games. And what does that look like? And how can we actually play into that in a way that's exciting?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, my friend Chris Bissett, who's also did design for Wretched and a lot of really cool stuff. He does a weekly like 1 hour session. Basically, it's a dungeon crawl in his game. I think it's the dungeon game, yeah, it's really good. Like you just smash through it because you've just got an hour. There's no dicking around, as it were. You're just smashing through dungeon rooms, and it works really well. And I think definitely exploring that sort of more
What was
format.
the name of that game again?
I think it's the Dungeon Game by Chris Bissett.
The Dungeon Game. Let me just read
that. And it works really well in these sort of short bursts. I think that's definitely something to explore because there's a lot of like almost baggage, I guess, from like the history of the game, where people are like, every game has to be 10-year campaign, every game has to be 3 to 4 hours long, etc. And you've got to have a fixed group. And I think breaking those assumptions and actually baking it into design is a really good step to sort of explore, get the genre out there.
So which one of you is going to design the 30-minute long romantasy game?
I mean, we sort of published that sort of.
It's going to happen. Yeah,
in the Horse Girl is arguably.
Well, it's interesting.
Tell us about
Horse Girl is not.
Tell us about Horse Girl. Tell us about Horse Girl.
Horse Girl is a solo journaling game by Samuel Mew, who we were very lucky to work with and publish. It's based off of The Wretched by Chris Bissett, which is a solo journaling game where you're sort of trapped in space. But in this one, you play as a 20-something woman who falls in love with a man, and he invites her to live with him under the condition that she be mentally and physically transformed into a horse. It's obviously exploring body horror. It's very dark. It's kind of gut wrenching to play. I played it once, and it's an experience. You are trying to escape the dynamic ultimately, in terms of much like the Wretched. In the Wretched, you're trying to survive and escape the spaceship. In this, you're trying to escape this very abusive dynamic. But within that, you're exploring. I think it's a good exploration of the mess of abusive relationships. How you don't see how it transforms you. There's a lot of layers to it beyond the very I guess controversial topic to it. But I think it's a really good example of how role-playing games are pushing into really strange and exciting directions.
Justin, I shouted over you. You want to bring us home? Finish us off.
I was going to say the Horse Girl. That's a game that legitimately intimidates me because I've seen it and I'm like, boy, digging into that is intimidating. So definitely looking forward to someday overcoming that and actually digging into it. But I know it's going to be a commitment. It's one of those games you're like, no, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to actually commit.
So, Aled and Panny, let me ask you, other than Salvage Union, what other great games do you have that our listeners might want to check out?
So many. I mean, at the moment we've got Shadow of Mog, the post-Brexit role-playing game for anyone who's getting Brexit nostalgia. That's one of the first ones we did, which is a very sort of strange concept. We published some Old School Essentials and Mothership zines, Mothership zine called Andromeda, and a trio of adventures called Albion Tales. We've also got Foundations, which is by Marsh Anna, which is a sort of solo journaling game where you're creating a world. And probably our next project coming out is going to be Achaoi, which is the sort of ancient Greek Merkball game I mentioned, which we're really excited about. I don't know if I've missed anything there, Aled.
My favorite game of all time, Mutants. It's just 24 pages of cat memes, but it's really, really good. It's the first game I ever wrote. But no, Mog I think is probably the most interesting out of them. You don't get to take individual actions. Everything's voted on as a group is kind of the core conceit. So it's like everything is group-based resolution. Which is quite fun. It leads to a lot of sort of politics at the table, I played it on my birthday with 15 people. It was great, but extremely chaotic.
What was the name of that game again?
Shadow of Mog.
Shadow of Mog. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll check it out. And Justin, I mean, there's a plethora of things, but what would you suggest people go and buy? What will put royalties in your pocket?
Well, my pocket. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by all the amazing games that Panny and Aled have just mentioned that I'm going to have to go check out. I'm excited to discover I'm only just barely scratching the surface of the Panny and Aled multiverse. But for me, I've got So You Want to Be a Game Master. And So You Want to Be a Game Master is great if you're looking to become a game master for the first time. I also think that it's a really great book that I think a lot of existing game masters have told me. I got into it thinking, oh, this will be fun. And then I discovered all this cool stuff I'd never even thought of before. So I think it's a really great place. And if you're looking to get into Justin's game mastering advice, it is designed to be the place to start and delve into dungeons and mysteries and urban crawls and hex crawls and point crawls and all these other sort of what I consider to be sort of foundational scenario structures and the basic skills of GMing. Otherwise, come visit me on the Alexandrian. I've got a YouTube channel and a Twitch stream every week where we do random GM tips. You can come and ask me questions about GMing. We also have a Discord that you can link to from my website, the Alexandrian, where there's just a community of GMs and designers who are constantly swapping tips and advice and resources. So just come on over, join the Alexandrian, and join the community. That's the biggest thing is I think about role-playing games in general, is that it's such a great way to build community. And come on over and join the Alexandrian community. I think everyone here would be welcome, and I think anyone listening to this would be very welcome in such a community. So come on by.
So I am Ben Riggs. I wrote Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons and Dragons. It's good. If you haven't read it, go read it. We also have a Patreon. It is a mere $3 a month. We have a Discord. You also get extra episodes. You can hear me. You can hear Call of Cthulhu creator Sandy Peterson having a conversation with Trail of Cthulhu creator Ken Hite. You can hear me interview second edition designer Zeb Cook in Hugh Hefner's suite in Lake Geneva. I will be posting, I think a 60-page chapter on the creation of third edition. If it's not up there when you hear this, it should be up very shortly. And we're going to try and keep to $3 a month for our Patreon. So it's less than the price of a cup of coffee here in the US. So please come support the show. Aled, Panny, Justin, this has been an absolute blast, a ton of fun. I can't thank you enough for being on.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, thanks for organising it, Ben, and thanks for coming, Justin. It's been really good chatting.
Thank you so much.